Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Danielle Nierenberg, President and Founder of Food Tank.
Wow, good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be here. I want to thank Secretary Ross for sharing her thoughts with us and really kicking off this Farm Tank event. Happy first day of fall. Again, my name is Danielle Nierenberg. I'm President of Food Tank, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here today. I also want to say a big hello to everyone who is watching online as part of our partnership with YouTube and Facebook Live. I want to announce that there are thousands of people from at least 100 countries who signed up to watch today's event. We are really excited that so many people could participate from all over the world. We encourage all of you, both in person and online, to use the hashtag #FoodTank throughout the summit. I want to give a really heartfelt thanks to Visit Sacramento's Farm to Fork program, and especially Nicole Rogers and her colleague Sarah Atalano. I'd also like to thank the Center for Land-Based Learning and Mary Kimball. As you heard from Nicole, the reason that we're having this summit is that Mary and Nicole called me about a year and a half ago. And they're both super women in every way, and they were the perfect people to partner with on this event. I also want to thank the University of California, Davis for lending their expertise to the summit. We're very grateful. And we're incredibly honored to be here in California's capital city, highlighting the amazing work of producers throughout the state. I'm especially excited to see so many young people and students in the room today. You are thinking critically about food and agriculture issues in a way that my generation hasn't, and I'm so looking forward to what you do over the next several years to really help fix some of these problems. And because all of us are thinking more globally about where our food comes from and how it was produced and who produced it, farmers, companies, and policymakers are changing their practices and developing innovations that will not only feed the world today, but also nourish the planet for generations to come. I've had this extraordinary opportunity to travel all over the world to 60+ countries now, interviewing hundreds and hundreds of farmers. And I learned from them that there are environmentally, socially, and economically sustainable ways that we can put in place today to make sure that hunger, obesity, food loss and food waste, worker injustice, and poverty are part of the world's past, not its future. And I do think that there is a recipe for this kind of change, and that is the reason that we organized the Farm Tank Summit. All of you who took the time to be here, both in person and online, are the ingredients for that recipe that we're creating over the next few days. And you're helping fulfill Food Tank's mission to convene and bring together the many different sides of the food system. We've chosen 5 topics as our main panel discussions today based on the suggestions of our partners here in Sacramento. These are issues that we think deserve more support, more attention, more research, and ultimately more funding and investment. For our first panel, we decided to focus on creating a more transparent food system and valuing farmers, workers, and eaters. This panel will shine a spotlight on the need for workers' rights and better production methods that both protect public health as well as the environment. For panel 2, we decided to focus on the idea of investing in food technology. And while smartphone apps and drones and robots have received a lot of attention, there are a growing number of ways that farmers and businesses are combining high and low technologies to provide healthy, nutritious food and safe food to eaters all over the world. Our third panel focuses on the need for better infrastructure in the food system, the growing interest in community kitchens, processing facilities, food hubs, and better shipping and distribution practices can increase farmers' incomes, prevent waste, and get food to people who need it the most. Our fourth panel will focus on the role of food businesses and how their practices are changing as a result of consumer demand. The panel will highlight what food and agriculture businesses, both large and small, are investing in, including developing different seed varieties, preventing water loss, and finding ways to lower greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture. Our final panel of the day will focus on the need for producing more environmentally sustainable and humane sources of protein. We'll hear from ranchers, fishers, advocates, and scientists who are looking at the environmental, economic, and social costs of protein production. I want to let you know that all of these the goal of these panels is really not to tell you from a bunch of so-called experts what to grow or what to eat. We're here to come up with solutions and create dialogue about practical ways that will help nourish both people and the planet. We don't want platitudes and sound bites. We're really here to learn from one another and realize that business as usual is no longer an option. I want to acknowledge that this summit has not been without a little bit of controversy. A few participants, speakers, and sponsors have really questioned why certain people were invited or placed on panels. And I understand their concerns, but I'm frankly more concerned about the future of California agriculture and the future of agriculture globally. We have to have some uncomfortable conversations to move forward. We are in an unprecedented global crisis, and the urgency of these issues has never been greater. At least 800 million people around the globe continue to go hungry, while at the same time, around 2.2 billion people are overweight or obese. And the paradox is that many of these overweight people are also malnourished because they're consuming poor, high-calorie diets. In addition, we continue to waste at least 1/3 of all food that is produced globally, leading to not only loss of income for farmers and rising hunger, but also increased greenhouse gas emissions and other environmental problems. Climate change is continuing to impact agriculture. As everyone in this room, as Californians, you know that issue all too well. Recent studies predict that California is now in an age of endless drought. This new normal will not only impact the region, but as Nicole mentioned earlier, it will impact eaters all over the world who depend on California to put food on their plates. But the problems we face also bring about unprecedented opportunity. Doom and gloom has not gotten us anywhere. We need to be hopeful because we are seeing hope every day in our work and in convenings like Farm Tank. And that is why we've asked some of the most influential food journalists, writers, and reporters to moderate our panels today. Let me just take a few minutes to introduce each of them. Julia Mietrich is the food and sustainability reporter from Capital Public Radio and will be moderating the panel on transparency in the food system. Beth Rugiak is the inside host on Capital Public Radio and will be moderating the panel on innovations in food technology. Twilight Greenerly is the managing editor of Civil Eats and will be moderating the panel on the need for better infrastructure in the food system. And Xiao-Qing Xu, the Director of Communications at the Institute for Systems Biology, will be moderating the panel on the business of food. And finally, Tom Philpott, the food and agriculture correspondent for my favorite magazine, Mother Jones, will be moderating the panel on sustainable protein. I have to take a few minutes to thank the sponsors who have really helped Food Tank put this summit together and some of our other summits. It's a fairly long list, but I think they deserve a lot of credit for their support. The Almond Board of California, Annie's Homegrown, the Barilla Center for Food and Nutrition Foundation, Barn Raiser, Blue Apron, Clearly Kombucha, Cliff Bar and Company, Clover Stornetta Farms, Driscoll's, Rich and Gina Downing from Tower Gardens, who have provided these beautiful tower gardens you see all over the conference, Elevation Burger, Fair Trade USA, Farmer's Fridge, Insight Coffee, Leafware, Neiman Ranch, Organic Valley, Panera Bread, PSAV, the Republic of Tea, Rhythm Superfoods, Terra Chips, and Veg Fund. And our media sponsors include the Food and Environment Reporting Network, Interpress Service, and Mother Jones. And I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank our food tank staff. They are a small group of really scrappy people who are so smart and passionate and make my job easier every day. Vanessa Botero-Lowry, Sebastian Rosemont, Daniel Stein, and Ashley Portman keep Food Tank running day to day, and I'm so grateful for their hard work. I also want to thank Patrice Garrity of Bose Productions for our behind-the-scenes event production, and I want to thank Brendan Konacki and his team for the live stream. And last but not least, I'd like to thank one of the co-founders of Food Tank, who is now our chair of the board, Bernard Pollock. It's really his vision to put these summits together and not have them just in the United States, but eventually all over the world. I'm also incredibly grateful for the Food Tank volunteers who've come from all over to support this event today. We are also grateful to the Hyatt staff, our Food Tank Board of Directors, our Food Tank Advisory Group, and our members worldwide for their incredible support. I also want to share with you that Food Tank Summits will continue throughout this year and well into 2017. We'll be having a summit in Chicago in November, a summit in Brazil in January, and right after the inauguration, we'll be partnering with the George Washington University to highlight the policies that the next administration and Congress can take to make the food system more sustainable. We'll also be having a summit in Boston in March with Tufts University that will focus on investing in discovery. And we'll have summits in Toronto, London, and some other cities next year. And we're already planning to come back to California. So it's an exciting time to be involved, and we hope you'll tell us what you want to hear more at these summits. Before we start the program today, I do have a few ground rules. I've already lectured you a little bit about listening to viewpoints that are different from your own, but now I'd like to give you a sense of what these panels will look like. Each panel will begin with a 7-minute keynote, followed by a 30-minute discussion on stage with panelists. I won't introduce each of our panelists, nor will our moderators, but you can read their bios, their extensive bios, and the programs you received. We will have about 15 minutes for questions and answers from both the online and in-person audiences. And for those of you asking questions in the room, please make sure that you're actually asking real questions and not accidentally giving your own presentation. I know that can be easy to do. We'll have plenty of time during the lunch breaks and dinner and for networking and talking to one another. For the questions, please just take 30 seconds to state your name, your organization, and your question with a question mark at the end of it, a real one. I know that I'm not very tall. I'm about 5'2", but I have no problem coming on stage and cutting you off. So you've been warned. I'm done scolding you, at least for now. So let's get this started. I'm really excited. It's my great pleasure to welcome our morning keynote speaker and the person I'll be awarding one of 2 bright spots in the Food System Awards that Food Tank will be giving today. Sauro Jayaraman is the co-founder and co-director of the Restaurant Opportunity Center United and the director of the Food Labor Research Center at the University of California, Berkeley. Sauro is truly one of my heroines in the food movement. She is an outspoken leader working to give all food service workers a seat at the table and an incredible convener bringing together 13,000 worker members, 100 plus employer partners, and several thousand consumer members in 32 cities nationwide as part of Rock United. Today, I'm honored to present her with one of Food Tank's Bright Spots in the Food System Awards. And these awards are given to individuals who are committed to highlighting stories of hope and success and developing innovations that nourish both people and the planet. Saru, thank you for your commitment to improving the food system for workers and for us all. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage.
Thank you. Hi, good morning. How is everybody? Good. So thank you so much to Danielle and Food Tank for the honor and for having me here today. It's really a pleasure to be here with you in our state capitol. I wanted to share a little bit with you about what is the hope, what is the success that they're referring to. I think it's the hope and the success that they're referring to that I'm going to talk about, and just give a little bit of background on what's happened with us over the last year that's been so exciting, and to me, I'm seeing the biggest change I've ever seen in 20 years working on worker issues right now in this moment. So it's very, very exciting. So actually last Sunday was the 15th anniversary of 9/11, as you know, and 9/11 was an important moment for me and our organization. That's when I founded the organization together with the restaurant workers who lost their jobs at Windows on the World, which was the restaurant at the top of the World Trade Center. And we commemorated the lives of the 73 workers who died in the restaurant that day, either jumped to their deaths or were incinerated in the restaurant because the plane hit below them that morning, and the heat rose so quickly that they were evaporated. So we commemorated that anniversary on Sunday, and it was a very emotional moment because it was both about remembering lives lost and thinking about 15 years since the tragedy that we've essentially built a movement for restaurant workers in the ashes of tragedy. We've grown over the last 15 years since 9/11 into a national organization. As you heard, we've actually grown a little bit since the numbers Danielle talked about, almost 20,000 worker members nationwide, 200 restaurant owners ranging from Danny Meyer and Tom Colicchio all the way down to small restaurant owners around the country who are working with us to raise wages and working conditions in the industry, and several thousand consumer members. And the reason we've grown so fast is the explosion in this industry. The restaurant industry right now is the second largest and absolute fastest growing sector of the U.S. economy. It's by far the largest segment of the food chain. When you look at the 20 million workers in the food chain, over half, close to 12 million workers in the United States work in the restaurant industry. 12 million. 1 in 11 workers in the United States right now works in the restaurant industry alone. 1 in 6 works in food as a whole, but 1 in 11 works in the restaurant industry alone. So it's not just the biggest segment of the food chain, it's actually the largest employer in the United States, the restaurant industry, and yet it happens to be also the absolute lowest paying employer in the United States. So every year the U.S. Department of Labor puts out a list of the 10 lowest paying jobs, and every year we win the award, 7 of the 10 lowest paying jobs in America, and the 2 absolute lowest paying occupations in the United States are the people who touch and serve our food. And so what does that mean? All of you who care about a local and sustainable and better food system, what does it mean? It means that when you've got the largest and fastest growing sector of our economy proliferating the absolute lowest paying jobs, it means that right now 1 in 3 working Americans works full-time and lives in poverty, and by 2020, 2021, some economists predict it will be 1 in 2. Half of all working Americans living in poverty, most of them restaurant and retail workers. And so who is going to be able to afford that wonderful local, organic, sustainable food, or food period, when half of the nation can't actually afford to eat? And half of the nation works in food. The same workers that are producing that wonderful food can't afford to actually eat it. And one of the key sources of the problem that we have seen in our industry is this issue that affects workers nationally that we have found dates back to slavery. So it turns out that tipping as a practice didn't originate in the United States, it originated in feudal Europe, When it came to the United States in the 1860s, it was right around the time of emancipation, and when it came, the restaurant lobby demanded the right to hire newly freed slaves and not pay them anything at all and let them live on customer tips, which was actually a mutation of the feudal concept, because in feudal Europe, serfs and domestic workers actually received a wage, and tips were always on top of that wage, a gratuity, an extra. But because of our ugly slave history, the restaurant lobby was able to successfully win law. The first minimum wage law that passed in 1938 as part of the New Deal said that restaurant workers could be paid as little as $0 an hour from their employer as long as they received tips that brought them up to the minimum wage. We went from a $0 minimum wage for tipped workers in 1938 to a whopping $2.13 an hour, which is the current legal federal minimum wage for tipped workers in these United States. It ranges between $2.13 and about $7 an hour in 43 states in the United States. Of course, California is one of 7 states that rejected this legacy of slavery about 40 years ago and demands that the industry pay the full wage with tips on top. But of course, there are restaurants in California clamoring for us to be like neighboring states and introduce a lower wage for tipped workers. And the whole argument, how have we gone 100 years with having a $2 wage, or an argument that these workers should continue, as slaves did, to receive nothing at all and then to get tips as their wage? Well, the idea has been, oh, it's okay, these workers earn a ton of money in tips, they're white guys working in fancy fine dining steakhouses, when in fact our research has shown that 70% of these workers are women. They're mostly women who work in IHOP and Applebee's and Olive Garden. They're women whose median wage, including tips, is about $8 an hour. They suffer from 3 times the poverty rate of the rest of the U.S. workforce, use food stamps at double the rate, so they literally can't afford to feed their families, even though they feed us in restaurants. And worst of all, they suffer from the worst sexual harassment of any industry in the United States, because when you're a woman who works at IHOP in neighboring New Mexico, where the wage is $2.13 an hour, you actually get your entire wage. Your wage is so low it goes to taxes, and you earn your entire income from tips, and then you have to tolerate whatever a customer might do to you because your income comes entirely from that customer. And so we've worked over the last many years to launch a campaign called One Fair Wage. We've had tremendous success eliminating the lower wage for tipped workers. This November, Maine, in a month, Maine will become the first East Coast state in the history of the United States to eliminate the lower wage for tipped workers. There are 3 bills we have moving in Congress, and this summer, Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party adopted our campaign and made it part of the Democratic platform, calling for one fair wage. The New York Times editorial board and USA Today editorial board have come out in support, but the most exciting part is the numbers of amazing high-profile restaurants like Danny Meyer who've worked with us to advance this issue. So we met with Danny last year. He said, I told him everything I've just told you. He said, I've hated this system for 20 years. Let's work together. Let's get rid of it. He eliminated tipping in his restaurants, and many, many restaurants have followed. Not all doing it the same way he did or as successfully, but he, as you know, has reported that for him it's been wildly successful, and we've been working with hundreds of other restaurants across the country for whom it has been successful as well. I think the key point here is that we are seeing now the biggest rift in our industry that we have ever seen, and I know I'm out of time, but we are seeing the biggest rift in our industry that I have seen in 20 years, where suddenly taking what we call the high road to profitability, treating your workers well and paying them well, and making a profit not in spite of doing that, but actually because you are treating people well, is suddenly not just the right thing to do, the moral thing to do, it's actually become trendy, it's actually become part of what we call sustainability, because ultimately I think you all know you cannot have a sustainable food system without sustainable wages and working conditions for the 20 million people who touch, prepare, and serve that food. It is impossible. It is impossible mostly because you will never succeed in having a sustainable food system as long as half the nation can't afford to eat anything that sustainable food system produces. So I do want to say, despite the gloom and doom, there's so much hope. Besides this big national campaign that we're running, I just want to point to one little thing in California, and then I promise I'll step off, which is that in California, I said we got rid of this system, but we still have issues. We just released a report in June showing that the Bay Area actually has the highest racial inequity in our industry of any region in the United States. It's actually double Seattle and Houston and many other cities in the United States. And so we have a lot to do here in California, too. And in Oakland, we are piloting a racial desegregation in the restaurant industry project that includes a big building that we're buying together with the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, where we're housing our restaurant colors, training hundreds of workers to move into fine dining service and bartending, providing them with access to restorative justice, which allows them to deal with their criminal justice records, background, and providing all kinds of other services to help low-wage workers move up the ladder. So for any of you who would like to connect with us to address these racial inequities here in California, while we may be ahead on wages, we are behind on racial inequity. We'd love to work with you. There's so much to do together. We really appreciate everything that everybody here is doing to make the food system better for all of us, including the 20 million people who touch our food. Thank you.